Did you know that a dream of green fields and abundant food could birth a nightmare that would never truly end? What if I told you that one of the worst industrial disasters in human history began not with an act of malice, but with a promise of a better tomorrow? You are standing on a dusty street in the heart of India, in a city named Bhopal. It's the 1970s. The air is warm, thick with the scent of jasmine and frying sun. The sound of bicycle bells and the gentle putter of auto rickshaws fills the air. It's a city of lakes, ancient and beautiful, their surfaces shimmering under a generous sun. This is a place on the cusp of something new, a place buzzing with the electricity of hope. Few people at the time understood how this hope was being built, and even fewer could imagine the consequences sleeping just beneath the surface. Maybe you're listening to this late at night, a cool breeze coming through your window, or perhaps you're on a morning commute, the city just waking up around you. Take a moment, if you feel like it, and let me know in the comments where and when you are joining this story. It's always nice to know who you're sharing the quiet moments with. The story of what happened here begins, not with a bang, but with a whisper of progress. A promise so seductive, so full of life, that no one saw the silent poison coiled within it. You feel the city's ambition. After centuries of colonial rule, India is flexing its own muscles, striving for self-sufficiency. The national mantra is progress, development, and food security for its burgeoning population. This era gives birth to the Green Revolution, a massive push to increase agricultural yields with modern technology. And into this hopeful landscape steps a giant from the West, a company called Union Carbide Corporation. To the people of Bhopal, this American company isn't an intruder, it's a savior. It arrives with the promise of jobs, of prosperity, and of a miracle chemical that will help feed the nation. You can almost see the gleaming image they presented, a vision of modern science, taming nature for the good of humanity. This is where a fascinating quirk of the human mind comes into play, something psychologists call optimism bias. It's the tendency for us to believe that we are less likely to experience a negative event compared to others. It's the little voice that says, "That won't happen to me, that won't happen here." The people of Bhopal, and indeed the Indian government, saw the gleaming towers of a new chemical plant rising from the earth and saw only the good. They saw fields protected from pests. They saw full granaries. They saw their city becoming a vital part of India's bright new future. The risks, the potential for disaster, seemed like a distant, abstract possibility, something that happened in other places, to other people. Historians still debate whether India's desperate push for industrial self-sufficiency made its government overlook the potential dangers posed by multinational corporations. Bhopal, known for centuries as the City of Lakes, was about to earn a new, much darker nickname. But for now, it was a city dreaming. You can see the workers, proud in their new uniforms, heading to the plant each morning. You can see the politicians cutting ribbons, their speeches full of grand promises. The Union Carbide plant wasn't just a factory, it was a monument to a new era. It was a steel and concrete symbol of a dream shared by an entire community. A dream they embraced with open arms, completely unaware of the devastating price it would one day exact. You walk through the gates of this new marvel, the Union Carbide India Limited plant. The sunlight glints off freshly painted pipes and vast, white storage tanks that sit like giant eggs in the red earth. Everything is new, orderly, and speaks of a competent, modern future. You can smell it, a faint, clean, chemical scent in the air, the perfume of industry. This facility is the crown jewel of the government's plan, a key weapon in the war on hunger. Its sole purpose is to produce a pesticide, a product with the deceptively gentle name of Sevin. You can picture the advertisements in farming magazines, showing happy farmers standing in fields of lush, green crops, their families safe from starvation, all thanks to this white powder. Sevin was a miracle. It was a carbamate insecticide, designed to kill the pests that devoured up to a quarter of India's food supply. Without the environmental persistence of older chemicals like DDT, the entire operation feels like a victory. But here is the secret, the dark bargain hidden in plain sight. Sevin, the life-saving product, required a devil's ingredient to create it. To make the gentle-sounding Sevin, the plant needed to first create and then store enormous quantities of one of the most volatile and toxic chemicals known to industrial science, methyl isocyanate, or mic. You can think of it like this: to bake a life-giving loaf of bread, you first have to create and store a massive, unstable bomb in your kitchen. MIC was not the product being sold. It was the dangerous intermediary, the bridge that had to be crossed to get to the prize. This is a classic example of what some call technological solutionism, the belief that any problem can be solved with a new invention, often without fully considering the new, and sometimes more dangerous, problems that invention might introduce. Mic is a truly nasty substance, a liquid at very low temperatures. It has an incredibly low boiling point of just 39.1 degrees Celsius, or about 102 degrees Fahrenheit. In the Indian heat, it exists in a constant state of agitation, desperately wanting to turn into a gas. And when it does, it is heavier than air, colorless, and it seeks out moisture with a violent hunger. It reacts with water in an exothermic reaction, meaning it generates its own heat, which in turn causes more of it to vaporize, creating a runaway chain reaction. When it touches the moisture in your eyes, your throat, your lungs, it burns them, effectively suffocating you from the inside out. One of the stranger curiosities of the whole affair is how the marketing for Sevin emphasized its relative safety for humans compared to other pesticides. This created a halo effect of safety around the entire plant, a public perception that the final relatively benign product represented the entire process. No one was marketing the truth about the thousands of gallons of lethal mic stored just behind the factory fence. Academics still debate the overall legacy of the Green Revolution, while it undoubtedly saved millions from famine by boosting crop yields. Many scholars argue that it came at a high cost, creating a deep dependency on chemical fertilizers and pesticides, which in turn had long-term environmental and health consequences. The Union Carbide plant in Bhopal was a physical embodiment of this debate. Here, you see it in the gleaming steel and concrete, a promise of food and life. But inside those tanks, you can almost feel the simmering pressure of the mic, a deadly secret waiting for its moment. The miracle chemical had a very dark soul, and it was sleeping right in the heart of the city. Now, let's take a journey across the globe, leaving the warm, dusty plains of central India behind. You feel the air grow cooler, the landscape shift from sun-baked earth to the rolling green hills of Appalachia. We are in West Virginia, in the United States, at a place called Institute. Here, nestled in a river valley, sits another Union Carbide plant. It looks remarkably similar to the one in Bhopal, almost like a twin. It performs the exact same function, producing Sevin using the same dangerous intermediary, methyl isocyanate. This is the American original, the blueprint upon which the Bhopal plant was based. But as you look closer, you start to notice the differences. And it's in these differences, these small, seemingly minor deviations, that the entire tragedy is written in advance. This is not a story of two identical twins separated at birth. This is a story of one twin given every advantage, every protection, while the other was sent into the world with critical, hidden weaknesses. The American plant was a fortress of modern safety technology. You can imagine a central control room, looking like something out of a science fiction movie of the era, with a state-of-the-art computer system monitoring every pipe, every valve, every tank. This system was designed to detect leaks and pressure changes long before a human operator ever could, sounding alarms and pinpointing problems with digital precision. The Bhopal plant had no such system. Its warnings relied on the workers themselves, on a technician happening to feel his eyes sting or smelling a strange chemical odor. It was the difference between a modern fire alarm system and hoping someone shouts fire in time. This well-known fact, the disparity in safety technology, is a cornerstone of the entire narrative of negligence. Then you look at the storage. In West Virginia, the mic was stored in multiple smaller tanks, made of stainless steel, which were refrigerated and partially buried in the earth. Each of these choices was a deliberate layer of safety. Smaller tanks meant a smaller potential leak. Stainless steel is highly resistant to corrosion. Refrigeration kept the volatile chemical calm and far from its boiling point, and burying them provided natural insulation. In Bhopal, you see 3 enormous, above-ground tanks, more than twice the size of their American counterparts, made of simpler carbon steel, and relying on a single, often strained refrigeration unit. They sat exposed to the ambient Indian heat, massive white elephants holding a sea of poison. The design choice in India prioritized bulk storage and lower cost over safety. An obscure but telling detail lies in the training and documentation. Many of the key operational manuals supplied to the Bhopal plant from the parent company were in English, a language many of the local workers and even some supervisors could not fully comprehend, leading to a procedural drift where an understanding of why a safety measure was in place was lost. Corporate ethics experts continue to debate the precise level of direct control the American parent company exerted over its Indian subsidiaries' day-to-day safety decisions. Was it a deliberate policy of creating a less safe, cheaper plant for a developing nation, or was it a catastrophic failure of oversight, allowing a distant subsidiary to cut corners to the point of disaster? The answer likely lies somewhere in the murky middle. Now, transport yourself back to Bhopal. You stand before the same pipes and tanks, but they look different to you now. You no longer see a monument to progress. You see a shadow, a compromised copy, an echo of a safer design, stripped of its most vital protections. Every missing alarm, every cheaper valve, every oversized tank is a silent testament to a system that valued an Indian life less than an American one. The plant in Bhopal was not just an American design. It was its ghost, haunted from the very beginning by the safety features it was never given. For a few years, the dream holds. You are a worker in the late 1970s, and the Union Carbide plant is a good place to be. The pay is steady, better than most jobs in Bhopal, and there is a sense of pride in being part of this modern enterprise. You learn the complex dance of pipes and valves, the hiss of steam, the hum of machinery. It feels important. It feels safe. The plant is a symbol of a prosperous future, and you are helping to build it. But then, things begin to change, slowly at first, like the turning of a season. The global demand for Sevin pesticide never quite reaches the optimistic projections it was built on. A series of droughts in India means farmers have less money to spend on premium pesticides. The plant, designed to be a roaring engine of profit, begins to sputter. It becomes less of a prized asset and more of a financial burden for the parent company half a world away. And when profits shrink, the first things to get cut are often the invisible ones. You start to notice it in small ways. A pressure gauge that has been faulty for weeks is simply painted over instead of being replaced. A training program that was once mandatory is now postponed indefinitely to save on instructor fees. The maintenance staff is cut in half, leaving the remaining crew overworked, scrambling to patch up a sprawling, complex machine that demands constant attention. It's like owning a brand new car and deciding to save money by never changing the oil. For a while, it still runs, but unseen damage is accumulating deep within the engine. You can feel the atmosphere shift. The initial pride and optimism among the workforce begins to curdle into a quiet, gnawing anxiety. Everyone knows the plant is becoming less safe, but speaking up is risky. Complaining could get you labeled as a troublemaker, or worse, cost you the best paying job you've ever had. Then, the whispers of unease become a scream. In December of 1981, a cloud of phosgene gas, another deadly chemical used in the Mike process, leaks from a faulty pipe. Phosgene was infamous for its use as a chemical weapon in World War I, a detail not lost on the workers. You see the panic as workers scramble for safety. One man, a plant operator named Mohammed Ashraf, is caught in the cloud. He dies an agonizing death 72 hours later. This is the first official fatality inside the Union Carbide plant. It's no longer a theoretical risk. It's a reality. The plant has shown its teeth. The event sends a shockwave of fear through the community, but it's quickly contained. Management assures everyone it was an isolated incident, a tragic but manageable accident. A particularly bizarre and telling curiosity from this period is the company's insistence on celebrating Safety Week, even as conditions deteriorated. You would see banners proclaiming safety is everyone's job hanging over leaking valves, a surreal display of corporate denial. This is where you see the cracks in the facade turn into gaping holes. Experienced engineers and technicians, alarmed by the declining standards, begin to quit, replaced by less experienced, cheaper new hires. Workers write letters of concern to management, even to government officials, but they are ignored. Historians and sociologists still debate whether this degradation of safety was a direct result of the economic pressures of the early 1980s, or if it was simply the inevitable outcome of a corporate culture that had prioritized cost-cutting from the very beginning. From your perspective on the factory floor, the distinction is meaningless. All you know is that the place that once felt like a promise now feels like a threat. You walk the familiar paths between the tanks and pipes, but now you see them with new eyes. You see the rust spots, the makeshift repairs, the silent ticking gauges. The dream of a green tomorrow is dying, and a dark, chemical fear is taking its place. Imagine a medieval fortress, built to withstand any siege. It has 6 layers of defense, a high stone wall, a deep moat, armed sentinels on the towers, a reinforced gate, a warning bell, and a final keep for retreat. Now, imagine the castle's own commander, in an effort to save a little money, decides to dismantle these defenses one by one. He drains the moat to save on water. He sends the sentinels home to save on wages. He removes the gate to sell the iron. Soon, the mighty fortress is nothing but a vulnerable stone shell, waiting for the first sign of trouble. This is exactly what happened at the Bhopal plant. There were 6 critical safety systems, 6 sentinels designed to contain the monster in tank 610. By late 1984, every single one of them was, for all intents and purposes, dead. Your first sentinel was the refrigeration unit. Its job was simple and vital: to chill the massive Mike tanks, keeping the volatile liquid in a state of sleepy calm, far below its boiling point. It was the chemical equivalent of keeping a dragon on ice. But refrigeration costs money, a lot of money, especially in the Indian heat. So, in June 1984, about 5 months before the disaster, management made a fateful decision. They shut the refrigeration unit down. The expensive Freon coolant was drained away to be used elsewhere. The official justification was that it was no longer needed since the tanks weren't being filled to capacity. The dragon was taken off its ice and left to bake in the ambient warmth. The second sentinel was the vent gas scrubber. This was a tall tower designed to be the plant's washing machine for poison. If any Mike gas were to escape, it would be routed through this tower, where it would be sprayed with a solution of caustic soda, neutralizing it and turning it into a far less harmful compound before it could reach the atmosphere. But the scrubber was notoriously unreliable and expensive to run. On the night of the disaster, it was on standby mode, which was a polite way of saying it was turned off. It was down for maintenance, waiting for a part, a common state for it to be in. The plant's chemical washer was unplugged. The third sentinel was the flare tower, the last line of defense. This was a giant pilot light, a pipe stretching high into the sky, designed to burn off any gas that somehow made it past the scrubber. It was the final, fiery gate. Its job was to incinerate the poison, turning it into less harmful components. But like the scrubber, the flare tower was also out of commission. A crucial piece of its connecting pipe had corroded and been removed for repairs weeks earlier. It had never been replaced. The flare tower was physically disconnected from the very system it was meant to protect. The fiery gate was gone. The 4th and 5th Sentinels were the eyes and ears of the control room. The alarms and gauges for Tank 610 itself. There was a high temperature alarm, but its trigger point had been reset to such a high temperature that it became useless. There was a pressure gauge, but it was widely known by the operators to be malfunctioning. They couldn't trust the readings it gave. The control room, the supposed nerve center of the operation, was effectively blind and deaf to the rising danger inside the tank. One of the most chilling curiosities of the entire event is what happened with the 6th and final Sentinel, the public warning siren. When the gas began to leak, the siren was sounded, but it was turned off after only a few minutes. Why? Because plant policy dictated that the siren, intended to warn the city, should not be allowed to run for long, in order to avoid causing public panic. They chose silence over safety. Safety engineers still debate the nature of this failure. Was it a cascade, where the failure of the refrigeration unit put too much pressure on the others? Or was it a systemic failure, a complete and total decay of the entire safety culture from top to bottom? From where you stand, looking at the silent, useless machinery, the answer seems obvious. The fortress had been stripped bare. The Sentinels weren't sleeping, they had been executed. And now, the city of Bhopal lay completely exposed, utterly defenseless against the horror that was stirring in the dark. While the Sentinels of steel and iron were being dismantled inside the plant walls, a lone voice was trying to raise the alarm from the outside. You see him now, a man in a small, cluttered newspaper office in Bhopal. His name is Rajkumar Keswani. He is not a powerful politician or a wealthy industrialist. He is a local journalist, the editor of a small fortnightly Hindi-language paper called Ropit, which translates to the report. He is hunched over his desk, the air thick with the smell of ink and cheap paper. For 2 years, this man has been consumed by a singular, terrifying obsession: the Union Carbide plant. The whispers of worried workers, the rumors of failing equipment, the stories of near misses. They have all found their way to his ears, and unlike everyone else, he is listening. He becomes the Cassandra of Bhopal. In Greek mythology, Cassandra was a princess, cursed by the gods to see the future, but to have no one believe her prophecies. This is Rajkumar Keswani's curse. He begins to publish a series of articles, each one more desperate than the last. You can almost read the headlines over his shoulder, stark and pleading: "Save, please, this city." Another reads, "Bhopal, sitting on the mouth of a volcano." He doesn't use vague language. He names the chemical, methyl isocyanate. He details its lethal properties. He reports on the death of the worker from the phosgene leak. He describes the failing safety systems, the lack of training, the corporate cost-cutting. He is laying out the entire blueprint for the disaster, piece by horrifying piece, for anyone who cares to read it. So why did no one listen? The answer lies in a powerful psychological defense mechanism, a phenomenon known as collective denial. When a truth is too painful, too frightening, or too disruptive to our worldview, it is sometimes easier for a whole community to subconsciously agree to ignore it. The people of Bhopal didn't want to believe Keswani. The plant provided jobs. It represented progress. It was a source of civic pride. To accept Keswani's articles as truth would mean accepting that this symbol of hope was actually a time bomb. It would mean confronting a fear so profound that it was easier to simply dismiss the messenger. The government officials, invested in the plant's success, dismissed him as a sensationalist. The Union Carbide management, of course, branded him a troublemaker, a fearmonger, peddling lies. They used their towering corporate authority to assure everyone that the plant was perfectly safe. An eccentric but deeply poignant curiosity is that Keswani, in his growing desperation, didn't just publish articles. He wrote personal letters to high-ranking government officials, including the state's chief minister, begging them to intervene. He received no reply. He tried to get his story published in larger, more influential national newspapers, but they weren't interested in a scare story from a provincial town. He was a small voice shouting into a hurricane of indifference. Historians and media theorists still debate the role of journalism in a case like this. Was Keswani's failure to be heard a symptom of a weak and underfunded local press? Or was it proof that even the most dogged journalism is powerless against the combined forces of corporate influence and public denial? You can feel his frustration, his terror. He has seen the future, and he is trying to warn everyone, but they are all looking the other way. He has given them the facts, the evidence, the insider testimony. He has done everything a journalist could do. But the city of Bhopal, caught in its collective dream of a better life, chooses to believe the comforting lie over the inconvenient, terrifying truth. As 1984 draws to a close, Keswani has run out of options. His final warnings have been published and ignored, and now a profound and heavy silence falls. The silence of a city that has been warned but refuses to wake up. The warnings have fallen silent. The ink on Rajkumar Keswani's final, desperate article is dry. And now, you are there, on the night of December 2nd, 1984. The city of Bhopal is exhaling after a long day. The sun has set, and a comfortable, mild winter coolness settles over the landscape. You are not in the affluent part of town with its spacious bungalows. You are walking through the narrow, unpaved lanes of a shantytown, a bosty that huddles right up against the southern fence of the Union Carbide plant. This is Jayaprakush Nagar, a place of makeshift homes built from scrap tin, mud bricks, and salvaged wood. It's a community humming with a life that the plant's managers, in their distant offices, could never truly comprehend. The air is a rich tapestry of smells. You can smell wood smoke from 100 small cooking fires, the sharp, delicious aroma of frying onions and turmeric. You hear the sizzle of dough hitting hot oil. The sound of children's laughter echoes as they play one last game of tag under the single, bare light bulb that illuminates a small intersection. The gentle murmur of conversations drifts from open doorways. Men, home from a day of labor, are talking quietly. Women are calling their children in for dinner. This is not a place of misery. It is a place of incredible resilience, a community woven together by necessity and shared experience. The Union Carbide plant looms behind them, a silent, industrial mountain. Its lights cast a sterile white glow, a stark contrast to the warm, flickering yellow of the lanterns and fires in the basti. But it's just background noise, a familiar part of the skyline. No one fears it tonight. You see families gathering for their evening meal, sharing simple food on woven mats. A popular Hindi film song plays from a small, tinny-sounding radio somewhere nearby. Life is normal. It is beautifully, tragically normal. One of the saddest curiosities of this night is the sleeping arrangements. Because the small one-room homes get stuffy and crowded, and because the night is pleasantly cool, many families choose to sleep outside. You see them laying out their cots, their sharpay, in the open air, under the vast star-filled Indian sky. It's a common practice, a way to find comfort and space. It feels safe, it feels peaceful. Tonight, this simple act of seeking comfort will become a death sentence, placing them directly in the path of the invisible cloud, with no walls to offer even the slightest protection. Historians and urban planners still debate whether the existence of these sprawling slums, packed so tightly against the fence of a major hazardous chemical facility, was a failure of municipal zoning, or an inevitable consequence of rapid, unregulated urbanization in post-colonial India. The truth is, people came to Bhopal for work, for the promise of a job at the plant, or in the businesses that served it. They built their homes where they could, on the unwanted land next to the railway lines and the factory wall. They were not squatters in the cynical sense. They were pioneers of their own lives, seeking a foothold in a new world. As the hour grows late, a deep quiet descends. The children are finally asleep. The radios are turned off. The cooking fires have died down to glowing embers. You can hear the gentle sound of a baby fussing, then being soothed back to sleep. You hear the distant rumble of a late-night train. The city is breathing, a slow, steady, collective rhythm. And in the darkness, inside the looming white tanks of the factory, a single drop of water is about to find its way into the wrong place, and the world is about to change forever. You are no longer in the quiet lanes of the sleeping city. You are now inside the heart of the machine, in the humming, dimly lit control room of the Union Carbide plant. It is just after 11 p.m. The night shift is underway. The atmosphere is relaxed, routine. You are one of the operators. You are not a villain. You are just a man doing a job that has become dangerously normalized. Tonight, your task is a seemingly simple piece of maintenance. A set of pipes connected to the mic's storage tanks needs to be washed out with water to clear any blockages. It's a standard procedure, done countless times before. But tonight, a series of small, fatal errors will align with devastating precision. The workers begin to flush the pipes with water. Crucially, they fail to insert a device called a slip blind, a solid metal disc that would physically isolate the pipes being washed from the rest of the system. Think of it as forgetting to close a critical floodgate on a dam before opening the water valves. This is not just one person's mistake. It is a failure of procedure, a sign of how lax the safety culture has become. This well-known fact, the failure to use the slip blind, is the initiating event of the entire physical disaster. The water, under pressure, flows through the pipes, and because the floodgate is open, it finds its way to a set of leaking valves. Valves that should have been sealed tight, but have been poorly maintained for months. The water trickles past the faulty seals, a tiny, insignificant stream at first, and it begins its journey toward tank 610. Inside the massive tank, 42 tons of liquid methyl isocyanate are resting. Remember, the refrigeration unit that was meant to keep it cool and stable has been switched off for months. The liquid is already warmer than it should be, more agitated, closer to its boiling point. And now, the water arrives. It's a tiny amount at first, but in the world of chemistry, it is a declaration of war. MIC and water are catastrophic enemies. The moment they touch, a violent exothermic reaction begins. It starts to generate its own heat. You can imagine it as a single match being dropped into a room filled with gasoline fumes. The reaction is slow at first, a subtle change. Back in the control room, around 11:30 p.m., the operators notice the pressure gauge for tank 610 beginning to rise. But remember, they know this gauge is unreliable. They dismiss it. They assume it's just another instrumentation error, a ghost in the machine they've grown used to. The chemical reaction is now feeding on itself. The heat from the initial reaction causes more mic to vaporize into a gas. This increases the pressure inside the tank. The increased pressure generates more heat, which vaporizes more liquid, in a terrifying, accelerating feedback loop. A strange and often overlooked curiosity is the presence of iron from the corroding carbon steel tank. The iron acts as a catalyst, dramatically speeding up the reaction, like pouring fuel on the growing fire. The operators are now getting more worried. The pressure is climbing faster. It's not a ghost, it's real. They can hear a low rumbling sound coming from the concrete sarcophagus that encases the tank. It's the sound of a giant beast waking from its slumber. Scientists and chemical engineers still debate the exact quantity of water that entered the tank. Estimates range from a few liters to several hundred, but in the end, the exact amount is academic. Any water was too much water. By 12:40 a.m., the situation is out of control. The pressure gauge is now off the scale. The operators can feel the vibrations through the concrete floor. The rumbling has become a deep, terrifying roar. The concrete casing around the tank, 3 feet thick, cracks under the immense strain. A safety valve, designed to release excess pressure in an emergency, bursts open, and a massive cloud of dense, white, toxic gas erupts from the top of the tank, shooting high into the cool night air. The bomb has gone off. The silent killer is free. You are back in the dusty lanes of Jayaprakash Nagar, sleeping under the stars. The distant rumble from the factory might stir you for a moment, but you dismiss it as the sound of a passing train and drift back into a shallow sleep. Then, the smell hits you. It's not a smell you can easily describe. It's sharp, metallic, like chili peppers being burned, but 1,000 times stronger. It feels heavy, and it invades your nostrils, your throat, your very being. Your eyes begin to stream, and a searing pain, like a hot poker, stabs into them. You sit up, gasping, confused. Your throat is on fire. A violent, racking cough erupts from your chest. A cough so deep, it feels like your lungs are trying to tear themselves out. Panic explodes in the darkness. All around you, people are waking up, screaming. You hear doors being thrown open, the terrified shouts of your neighbors. What is it? What's happening? In the dim light, you see figures stumbling out of their homes, clutching their throats, their eyes squeezed shut against the unbearable pain. Children are wailing, their small bodies convulsed with coughing. The air itself has become poison. It's a feeling of absolute terror, of drowning on dry land. Your every instinct screams at you to run, but where? Which way is safe? There is no visible threat, no fire, no monster, just this invisible, suffocating presence. You look towards the plant, and in the stark industrial light, you see it. A dense, white cloud, like a malevolent fog, billowing from one of the towers and rolling slowly, inexorably, towards you. It hugs the ground, silent and heavy. This is the white cloud of death. It's not smoke, it's a dense aerosol of might gas, and it's moving with the gentle night breeze, directly into the sleeping communities. You scoop up your child, or grab your parent's hand, and you join the frantic, stumbling exodus. You just run. You run away from the plant, away from the cloud, but you can't outrun the air. With every panicked breath you take, you draw the poison deeper into your body. You see people fall. They simply collapse in the street, their bodies twitching, a white foam frothing at their lips. You see a cow, its eyes wide with terror, stagger and fall, its legs kicking weakly in the dust. The normal, familiar sounds of the night have been replaced by a symphony of horror, a cacophony of coughing, choking, and screaming. One of the most tragic curiosities of that night was the public's reaction to the smell. The sharp, peppery odor led many to believe there was a chilly fire, a common enough occurrence. Some people, trying to find relief from the burning sensation, splashed water on their faces. But remember, Mike reacts violently with water. This simple, instinctive act of comfort only intensified their agony, turning the chemical into a searing acid on their skin and in their eyes. You are now part of a desperate, panicked river of humanity flowing through the streets of Bhopal. You don't know what's happening, only that to stay still is to die. You stumble over bodies in the dark. Your vision is a blurry, painful mess. Your lungs feel like they are filled with broken glass. Historians and disaster response experts still debate the effectiveness of the initial plant response. The operators, caught in their own panic, failed to immediately raise a citywide alarm. They sounded the plant's internal siren, but then, following the bizarre policy of not wanting to cause public panic, they turned it off. They then turned on a different siren, the all-clear signal, adding fatal confusion to the chaos. People running from the gas heard the all-clear, and some, thinking the danger was over, tragically turned back towards their homes, back towards the cloud. You don't hear the siren, or if you do, it makes no sense. All you know is the pain, the burning, and the primal, desperate need to find a pocket of clean air to breathe. But on this night, in this city, there is none. The running stops. The frantic escape of the night gives way to a stunned, stumbling dawn. The sun begins to rise over Bhopal, a neutral, indifferent observer to the horror below. Its first rays, usually a symbol of hope and renewal, now serve only to illuminate the full, breathtaking scale of the devastation. You stand on a street, the strange chemical smell still hanging heavy in the air, and you look around. The city that was so full of life just a few hours ago is now eerily, unnaturally silent. The screams and the panic have faded, replaced by a low collective moan of pain and the sound of 1,000 people coughing. The streets are littered not with rubble, but with bodies. They lie where they fell, in the contorted postures of a sudden, agonizing death. Men, women, children, and animals, all frozen in their last, desperate moments. It's a scene from a forgotten history, a medieval plague visited upon a modern city. A slow, new migration begins. The survivors, the ones who were on the edge of the cloud or who were strong enough to withstand its initial assault, begin to move again. But they are not running now. They are shuffling, a vast, blinded, choking army of ghosts, all moving in one direction, towards Hamidia Hospital, the city's largest public medical facility. You join this procession of the damned. You see people being carried on the backs of their relatives, or pushed in wooden handcarts. Everyone is coughing, a single, horrifying chorus of damaged lungs. Their eyes are swollen shut, streaming with tears that offer no relief. You arrive at the hospital, and you see that it is not a sanctuary. It is the epicenter of the chaos. The grounds, the hallways, the courtyard. Every square inch of space is already overwhelmed by a writhing sea of suffering humanity. You are now a doctor, a nurse, a medical student, anyone with a white coat, and you are facing an apocalypse. The doors of your hospital burst open, and the city's dying pour in. You have never seen anything like this. You have been trained to deal with heart attacks, with broken bones, with infections. You have not been trained for this. What is this poison? No one knows. Union Carbide, in the first critical hours, provides no information. They maintain a wall of silence. So you do the only thing you can. You treat the symptoms. You see burning eyes, so you wash them with water. You see people who can't breathe, so you try to give them oxygen, but your supply runs out in an hour. You give them steroids, anything to reduce the inflammation in their lungs. It's like fighting a monster in the dark. You can hear it, you can feel its claws, but you don't know what it is or how to kill it. This is a well-known and infamous part of the tragedy, the medical confusion. Doctors were effectively fighting blind. A truly heartbreaking curiosity from that morning is the story of Ghulam Dastagir, the deputy station master at the Bhopal railway station. As the gas cloud enveloped his post, he did not flee. He stayed, knowing he was dying, to alert an incoming passenger train, the Gorakhpur-Mumbai Express, and prevent it from pulling into the station and into the heart of the cloud. He saved hundreds of lives with his last breaths. He was found slumped over his desk, dead. The sheer number of casualties is impossible to comprehend. The hospital morgue, designed to hold a few dozen bodies, is filled within the first hour. They begin stacking the dead in the corridors, in the offices, anywhere they can find space. The true death toll from that first morning is still a subject of intense and bitter academic debate. The Indian government's initial figures were shockingly low, in the hundreds. Survivor organizations and independent researchers insist that at least 3,000 people died in the first 72 hours alone, with thousands more to follow in the coming weeks. From where you stand, surrounded by the dead and the dying, the debate over numbers feels obscene. All you know is that it is too many. The sun is higher in the sky now, and Bhopal is a city drowning in its own air, its hospitals turned into morgues, and its doctors into helpless witnesses to a chemical massacre. Let's step away from the chaos of the hospital for a moment. and enter a different, quieter world. The world of the microscopic. You are now small enough to travel on a single breath of air, to see what this silent killer, methyl isocyanate, actually does when it enters the human body. It is a masterpiece of biological destruction, elegant in its devastating simplicity. The poison's first and most immediate target is water. The mic molecule is desperately, violently attracted to it, and your body, of course, is a world of water. The first point of contact is the delicate, moist surfaces of your eyes. The mic instantly reacts with the water in your tears, creating compounds that are essentially a form of acid. This causes an immediate, searing burn, destroying the cells of the cornea and leading to blindness, sometimes temporary, sometimes permanent. It's a chemical burn, as if a drop of acid has been placed directly onto your eyeball. Next, you travel with the inhaled gas down the windpipe and into the lungs. The lungs are a beautiful, intricate structure, a vast, branching tree of airways that end in tiny, delicate sacs called alveoli. This is where the magic of breathing happens, where oxygen passes into your blood. But these surfaces are also, by necessity, incredibly moist. When the cloud of mic floods this delicate system, it unleashes a catastrophic reaction. It burns the lining of the bronchial tubes, causing them to swell shut. It attacks the alveoli, causing them to fill with fluid. This is called pulmonary edema. In simple terms, the victim drowns from the inside, their own body fluids filling their lungs until they can no longer absorb oxygen. For thousands in Bhopal, this was the swift and brutal cause of death in the first few hours. But the horror of mic doesn't stop there. It is not just a surface-level irritant. It is a systemic poison. Once in the lungs, it easily passes through the damaged alveoli and into the bloodstream. Now, it can travel anywhere in the body. It attacks the liver, the kidneys, the immune system, the reproductive system. It is a chemical sledgehammer, smashing the delicate machinery of life wherever it goes. One of the strangest and most debated curiosities among toxicologists is the question of cyanide. Some researchers believe that when mic is metabolized by the body, it can break down and release cyanide, a fast-acting poison that stops cells from being able to use oxygen at all. This would explain the sudden convulsive deaths and the cherry-red color of some of the victims' blood, a classic sign of cyanide poisoning. Union Carbide fiercely denied this possibility for years, as it would have implied a specific and available antidote existed, sodium thiacyanate. Historians of science still debate the long-term impact of Union Carbide's refusal to release its internal toxicology data on mic. In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, the company claimed it was a trade secret, a stance that left doctors in Bhopal scrambling for information and trying treatments based on guesswork. This withholding of critical medical information in a mass casualty event is now widely seen as a profound ethical breach. So you see, the cloud that rolled over Bhopal was not one single weapon, but an entire arsenal. It was a blinding agent, a choking agent, and a systemic poison all rolled into one. It didn't just kill, it dismantled the human body, piece by agonizing piece. And for those who survived the initial onslaught, the poison did not leave. It stayed, embedded deep within their cells, a silent killer that would continue its work for years, for decades, for generations to come. The science of this silent killer is the science of a slow, unfolding nightmare. You are no longer in the microscopic world of a single cell, or the chaotic world of an overwhelmed hospital. You are now half a world away, in a quiet, carpeted boardroom in Danbury, Connecticut, the global headquarters of Union Carbide Corporation. The news from Bhopal has just arrived, trickling in through telex machines and frantic transatlantic phone calls. There is shock, of course, but you can feel another, more powerful instinct kicking in almost immediately, a corporate reflex as old as commerce itself. It is the instinct for survival, not the survival of the victims, but the survival of the company, its reputation, and its stock price. An industrial accident of this magnitude is not just a failure of engineering, it is a failure of story. And the first, most urgent task is to seize control of that story, to write a new one before the world writes it for you. Out of this crucible of corporate panic, a narrative is born. It is simple, it is clean, and it is brutally effective. It is called the sabotage theory. This is the story you will tell the world. It goes like this. The disaster was not an accident caused by failing equipment, shoddy maintenance, or a flawed design. It was a deliberate, criminal act. A single, disgruntled employee, angry at his superiors, intentionally and maliciously connected a water hose directly to the mic tank, knowing full well it would cause a catastrophic reaction. In this version of events, Union Carbide is not the villain. It is also a victim, the target of a vengeful employee. The company's faulty safety systems, the ones that were shut down or broken, are no longer relevant because no safety system in the world, the story goes, can be designed to withstand a determined act of sabotage. This is a classic and fascinating example of a psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. It's the profound mental discomfort we feel when we hold two or more contradictory beliefs, or when our actions conflict with our beliefs about ourselves. For the executives at Union Carbide, the two conflicting thoughts were, we are a responsible, safety-conscious American company, and our plant just caused the deaths of thousands of people through catastrophic negligence. Holding these two ideas at the same time is psychologically unbearable. So, the mind finds a way to resolve the conflict, and it is almost always easier to invent a new, comforting belief than to change a core belief about oneself. The sabotage theory was that comforting belief. It was psychologically easier to invent a single, evil saboteur than to accept the terrifying truth of systemic, corporate failure. The sabotage theory became Union Carbide's official and unwavering explanation for the disaster. A well-known fact they would cling to for decades, but it was a story with enormous holes. No credible evidence of a saboteur was ever produced. The specific employee they eventually tried to blame had a solid alibi, and the theory required a series of physically improbable actions, all performed in the dark, without anyone noticing. A far more obscure curiosity is the nature of Union Carbide's own internal investigation. They dispatched a team of American technical experts to Bhopal, but their mission, it seems, was not to uncover the objective truth, but to find evidence that would support the sabotage theory they had already decided upon. It was less an investigation and more of a confirmation exercise. Business ethics scholars still debate whether Union Carbide's sabotage theory was a calculated legal strategy from the outset, or a genuine delusion born from extreme corporate cognitive dissonance. Perhaps it was both. From your vantage point in that quiet boardroom, you can see the appeal of the story. It turns a complex, ugly narrative of corporate greed and neglect into a simple, black and white crime story. While the doctors in Bhopal were fighting to keep people breathing, the lawyers and public relations experts in Danbury were fighting to keep a story alive. A story that shifted the blame, protected the brand, and allowed them, in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, to continue believing they were the good guys. Just 4 days after the gas leak, on December 7th, 1984, a private plane touches down at the small airport in Bhopal. You are there, on the tarmac, part of the crowd of stunned journalists and grim-faced government officials. The door of the plane opens, and out steps a man who, for a brief, dramatic moment, will become the human face of the entire catastrophe. He is Warren Anderson, the chairman and CEO of Union Carbide Corporation. He is an older man, tall, distinguished, dressed in a sharp American business suit that looks profoundly out of place in the dusty, grief-stricken Indian city. His expression is one of grave concern. He has flown halfway around the world, he says, to see the situation for himself, to offer aid, to take moral responsibility. It is a bold move, a classic public relations gesture designed to show that the company's leader is not hiding in some distant boardroom, but is on the ground, sharing in the tragedy. You can almost feel the calculated nature of the visit. It's meant to convey compassion, control, and a sense of American corporate accountability. But the script for this particular piece of theater is about to be violently rewritten. As Anderson and his entourage drive from the airport towards the company's guest house, their convoy is intercepted by police. You see the flashing lights, the screech of tires. The cars are surrounded. Warren Anderson, the powerful head of a global multinational corporation, is placed under arrest by the Bhopal police. The charge is culpable homicide. The news of his arrest spreads like wildfire. For the survivors, for the people of Bhopal, who are still in the midst of burying their dead, it is a moment of stunned, almost unbelievable catharsis. Justice, it seems, can be swift. The man in charge, the man at the very top of the pyramid, is being held accountable in a way that almost never happens. You can feel a surge of something that feels almost like hope. For a few hours, it seems like the normal rules of power and money have been suspended. The American CEO is sitting in a room at the Union Carbide guest house, which has been declared a temporary jail, his passport confiscated. A famous photograph from that day captures him looking weary and shocked. The powerful executive suddenly rendered powerless. But this moment of justice is fleeting, an illusion that will evaporate as quickly as it appeared. The arrest of such a high-profile American CEO causes an immediate and frantic diplomatic scramble. You can imagine the phones ringing in the Indian Prime Minister's office in New Delhi, in the American Embassy, in the State Department in Washington, D.C. The pressure is immense. The Indian government, while needing to appear tough for its domestic audience, is also deeply concerned about alienating a major American investor and souring relations with the United States. A strange and still debated curiosity of this episode is the exact chain of command that led to Anderson's release. Who made the final call? Was it a direct order from the central government in New Delhi, overriding the authority of the local police? After only 6 hours in custody, Warren Anderson is released on bail. He is then quietly, almost secretively, whisked away on a state government plane back to New Delhi, and from there he flies out of the country, never to return. He has spent less than a day on Indian soil. Legal scholars and historians still fiercely debate the legality and propriety of this rapid release. Was it a necessary diplomatic maneuver to de-escalate an international incident, or was it a profound betrayal of justice? A clear signal that the powerful and the foreign operate under a different set of rules. For the people of Bhopal, the feeling is one of whiplash and bitter betrayal. The brief hope of accountability vanishes. The CEO who flew in to take moral responsibility has fled, leaving behind a legal vacuum and a city of victims. His fleeting arrests and swift departure becomes a symbol, a crystallization of the injustice that will define the Bhopal story for decades to come. With Warren Anderson gone, the fight for justice changes shape. It moves from the dusty streets and overflowing morgues of Bhopal into a new, sterile, and bewildering arena. You are now in the world of international law, a world of dark suits, of leather-bound books, and of arguments that stretch on for years. A world where human suffering is translated into the cold, dry language of legal briefs and financial liabilities. The immediate, visceral horror of the gas leak gives way to the slow, grinding machinery of the courts. For the survivors, this is a disorienting shift. Their pain is now a case file, their lost loved ones a statistic in a claim for damages. The legal battle that ensues is a colossal, tangled mess. The Indian government, in a move that is still debated today, passes a special law in 1985 called the Bhopal Gas Leak Disaster Act. This is a strange and remarkable piece of legislation. It appoints the Indian state as the sole legal representative for every single victim. This was done, in theory, to protect the poor and illiterate victims from being exploited by ambulance-chasing lawyers, and to present a single, powerful front against the American corporation. This act, a fascinating legal curiosity, effectively took away the individual's right to sue and placed all their hope in the hands of the government. So, a single lawsuit is filed on behalf of over 500,000 claimants in the United States, seeking an astronomical sum of $3.3 billion. The hope is that an American court, with its history of large corporate settlements, will deliver a just result. But Union Carbide has its own army of lawyers, and they have a powerful weapon. It's a legal doctrine with a Latin name, forum non conveniens. It sounds complicated, but the argument is simple. The case would be more convenient, more appropriate to try in India. The witnesses are in India. The evidence is in India. The plant is in India. It sounds reasonable, but everyone knows the unspoken truth. A settlement from an Indian court would be exponentially smaller than one from an American court. After years of legal wrangling, the US courts agree with Union Carbide. The case is sent back to the Indian legal system, the very system the victims had hoped to bypass. It is a devastating blow. Finally, in 1989, after years of deadlock, the Indian Supreme Court pushes for an out-of-court settlement, and a number is reached. This is the well-known, infamous fact at the heart of the legal story. Union Carbide agrees to pay $470 million in a final, full settlement of all claims, civil and criminal, forever. It sounds like an enormous amount of money, but then you start to do the math. The Indian government had documented over 500,000 people with injuries and thousands of deaths. When the $470 million was finally, slowly distributed over the next decade, the compensation was shockingly small. For the families of the dead, the average payment was around $2,000. For the hundreds of thousands with permanent, life-altering injuries, the average payment was about $500. $500 for a lifetime of blindness, of ruined lungs, of an inability to work. The price of a life, calculated by the courts, was worth less than a used car. Legal and human rights scholars still debate whether the Indian government's decision to accept the settlement was a pragmatic act to get some money to victims quickly, or a catastrophic failure to hold a multinational corporation fully accountable. The government argued that a protracted legal battle could have lasted for decades, with the victims receiving nothing in the meantime. Activists argue that they settled for pennies on the dollar, setting a dangerous precedent for corporate crime in the developing world. From your perspective, watching the survivors receive their meager compensation checks, the academic debate feels distant. You see the insult. The incalculable loss of a community has been calculated, and the number is a betrayal. The court case is over. The final number has been written down in a ledger. From a legal and financial perspective, the book on Bhopal has been closed. But you are still in the city, and you see that the story is not over. It has simply moved from the courtroom into a new, more intimate, and more agonizing theater, the human body. The $470 million settlement, a number that sounds so large, has been reduced to a pittance. That $500, which was supposed to cover a lifetime of suffering, barely covers a few months of medicine. And for the survivors, the living ghosts of Bhopal, the real sentence is just beginning. It is a life sentence of chronic illness, of pain that has no name, and of a body that has become a prison. You are a survivor. You wake up every morning, and the first thing you are aware of is your breath, or rather, your lack of it. Your lungs, scarred and damaged by the gas, can no longer do their job properly. Every breath is a conscious effort, a shallow, unsatisfying sip of air. You feel a constant tightness in your chest, as if a heavy weight is pressing down on you. Doctors call it obstructive airway disease. You call it suffocating in slow motion. You can't walk up a flight of stairs without stopping to gasp for air. You can't play with your children. You are perpetually exhausted. This is the most common and well-known legacy of the gas. the Bhopal cough that echoes through the city's clinics to this day. Then there are your eyes. They burn, always. The world is a permanent, blurry haze, as if you are constantly looking through a dirty window. Sunlight is an enemy, a physical pain that forces you to squint and hide in the shadows. Your body is a symphony of other ailments. Your stomach is in constant turmoil. You have strange rashes on your skin. You suffer from debilitating fatigue, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep can cure. But the true, generational horror of the poison reveals itself in the children. You watch a new generation being born in the years after the disaster, and you see that the gas did not die with the dead. It passed itself on. Babies are born with missing lips, with twisted limbs, with holes in their hearts. Children grow, but their minds do not. They suffer from learning disabilities, from stunted growth. A particularly cruel and obscure curiosity of this generational poisoning is the epidemic of gynecological problems. Young girls, born long after the leak, start to experience horrific menstrual disorders and hormonal imbalances at an alarming rate, a sign that the poison has scrambled the very code of life in their community. Beyond the visible scars on the body is the invisible wound on the mind. You suffer from what the outside world calls post-traumatic stress disorder. You have nightmares, vivid, terrifying replays of that night. A sudden, sharp smell, like burning chilies, can send you into a spiral of panic. The sight of a low-hanging morning fog makes your heart pound. You live with a constant, humming anxiety, a feeling that the world is not a safe place, and you carry a profound, crushing burden of survivor's guilt. Why did you live when your husband, your wife, your child died beside you in the street? Sociologists and psychologists still debate whether the psychological trauma in Bhopal is a classic case of PTSD or a more complex, socially embedded chronic grief compounded by decades of injustice and poverty. For you, the label doesn't matter. All you know is the haunting. You and hundreds of thousands like you are the living ghosts of Bhopal, spectral reminders of a night that never ended, haunting the streets of your own city with your coughing, your blindness, and your sorrow. The legal battles fade into the background. The international headlines move on to other tragedies, and a strange, deceptive quiet settles over Bhopal. But the disaster is not over. It has simply changed its form. The first killer came from the air, a swift, suffocating cloud. The second killer is rising from the earth, a slow, insidious poison that you cannot see, smell, or taste. You are standing outside the gates of the abandoned Union Carbide factory, a decade, now 2 decades after the leak. The place is a ruin, a ghost factory. The once gleaming white tanks are now scarred with rust, like giant decaying bones. Weeds as tall as a person have reclaimed the grounds, strangling the forgotten machinery. A profound, unnatural silence hangs over the site, broken only by the wind whistling through shattered window panes. This factory is not just a monument to a past tragedy. It is the source of a new, ongoing one. When Union Carbide packed up and left, they didn't just abandon the buildings. They left behind their toxic garbage, thousands of tons of chemical waste, leftover pesticides, and poisonous byproducts were simply dumped in open pits around the factory, or sealed in corroding steel drums and left to rot under the sun. You can almost see it happening. Every year, when the monsoon rains come, they drench this toxic wasteland. The water percolates through the poisoned soil, through the leaky drums, brewing a deadly chemical tea. This toxic liquid then seeps down, deeper and deeper, until it reaches the aquifer, the vast underground reservoir of water that the surrounding communities rely on for life. You are now in one of those communities. A generation after the gas leak, you are a young mother, born after 1984. You never breathed the gas, but you live in its shadow. You walk to the local hand pump to get water for your family. The iron handle is cool in your hand. You pump, and the water that gushes out looks clear. It looks clean, but you know it isn't. Sometimes it has a faint, sweet, chemical smell. Sometimes it has a metallic taste. But it is the only water you have. This is the water you will use to cook your family's food, to wash your children's clothes, to quench their thirst on a hot day. This simple, life-giving act of drawing water has become a daily act of poisoning. The company that inherited Union Carbide's legacy, Dow Chemical, has consistently argued that the 1989 settlement absolved it of any and all liability, including the cleanup of the site. This is the well-known central fact of the environmental disaster. A bizarre and terrifying curiosity discovered by independent researchers who tested the water is the sheer complexity of the contamination. It's not one poison, but a cocktail of them, including known carcinogens like carbon tetrachloride and heavy metals like mercury and lead. Poisons that bioaccumulate, building up in the body over time. The second disaster is slower than the first, but in many ways it is more cruel. The gas killed indiscriminately in one night. The water cripples a new generation slowly from the inside out. Environmental lawyers and international bodies still debate the application of the polluter pays principle in this case. Who is legally responsible for cleaning up this mess? Union Carbide, which no longer exists as an independent entity, Dow Chemical, its successor, the Indian government, which now officially owns the contaminated land. This endless legal buck-passing is the reason the factory still stands as a festering wound on the landscape. For you, the young mother at the hand pump, this debate is meaningless. All you see are the consequences. You see the children in your neighborhood with twisted bones, with skin that breaks out in sores. You see the alarming rates of cancer and organ failure. The factory may be silent, its machines dead, but its ghost has learned a new way to kill. It has poisoned the very water that is meant to sustain life, ensuring that Bhopal's tragedy is not a memory, but a daily, constant, and inescapable reality. Let's pull back from the poisoned groundwater and the grieving families, and ascend to a more abstract, but equally chilling, place. You are back in the boardroom. Not just Union Carbide's boardroom, but any boardroom, anywhere in the world, where decisions are made that affect the lives of people far away. The Bhopal disaster was not just a failure of pipes and valves. It was a profound failure of human psychology, a perfect storm of cognitive biases that allowed good, intelligent people to make catastrophically bad decisions. To understand how Bhopal happened, you have to understand the anatomy of how a corporation thinks. First, you encounter a powerful phenomenon called diffusion of responsibility. Imagine you are a mid-level manager at Union Carbide in the early 1980s. You receive a report from the Bhopal plant requesting a significant budget for safety upgrades. You know it's important, but you also know that your performance is judged on your division's profitability. Approving the expense will hurt your numbers. Denying it saves money. Besides, you think the final decision isn't really yours. Your boss has to approve it, and his boss has to approve him. The safety department is also involved, as is the local management in India. With so many people sharing in the decision, your personal sense of responsibility is diluted. It's like being in a crowd watching someone in trouble. Everyone assumes someone else will step in, and often, nobody does. In the corporate hierarchy, responsibility for safety became so diffuse that, in the end, no single person felt they owned it. Next, you witness the insidious effects of groupthink. The boardroom is a social environment. There is immense pressure to conform, to agree with the consensus, especially when that consensus is being driven by a powerful leader or a prevailing company culture. The culture at Union Carbide in that era, driven by economic downturn, was one of aggressive cost-cutting. You can imagine a meeting where someone raises a concern about safety at the distant Indian plant. The other executives shift uncomfortably. The CEO talks about the need to tighten belts and improve the bottom line. It becomes socially and professionally risky to be the lone voice of caution, the alarmist who is not a team player. Dissent is quietly suppressed, not through direct orders, but through social pressure. The group collectively convinces itself that cutting corners on safety is a reasonable, justifiable business decision. But perhaps the most powerful psychological force at play is the simple, brutal fact of distance. The people who would be affected by these decisions were not neighbors. They weren't even names or faces. They were an abstraction, a data point on a spreadsheet labeled Bhopal. Psychologists call this the devaluation of distant lives. It is a sad but well-documented quirk of human empathy. We feel the pain of one person we can see far more acutely than the pain of 1,000 people we can't. A strange but telling curiosity from internal company memos is how the Bhopal plant was often referred to as a low-investment facility, a clear indication of its perceived lesser value compared to its American counterparts. This wasn't necessarily conscious malice, but a subconscious bias that made it easier to accept a lower standard of safety for people half a world away. Organizational psychologists still debate which of these factors was the most significant contributor to the disaster. Was it the bureaucratic diffusion of responsibility, the social pressure of groupthink, or the empathetic void created by distance? The truth is, they were all woven together, creating a corporate mindset that was perfectly insulated from the human consequences of its own choices. The tragedy of Bhopal, from this perspective, wasn't an accident. It was the predictable, logical outcome of a particular way of thinking. A way of thinking that is still alive and well in boardrooms all over the world. It's a chilling reminder that the most dangerous chemical a company can produce is a culture of indifference. The scream that tore through Bhopal on that December night did not fade away. It echoed. It traveled across oceans and continents, through the halls of government and into the boardrooms of corporations that had previously operated with a comfortable sense of impunity. The sheer televised horror of what happened in India was a global wake-up call, a brutal lesson written in poison and paid for with thousands of lives. From this immense tragedy, a slow, painful, and imperfect movement for change was born. You are now a part of this global conversation, a legislator, an activist, an engineer, trying to make sure that a Bhopal can never happen again. The most immediate and tangible legacy of Bhopal was a revolution in industrial safety regulations. Before Bhopal, the chemical industry in many countries, including the United States, was largely self-regulated. The public had very little idea what kinds of chemicals were being stored and used in the factories in their own backyards. Bhopal shattered this illusion of safety. It revealed that a seemingly benign factory could be hoarding a chemical capable of wiping out a city. In response, governments around the world began to act. The United States, in 1986, passed a landmark piece of legislation known as the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, or EPCRA. This was a direct consequence of the Bhopal disaster. For the first time, it became the law of the land that companies had to disclose the toxic chemicals they were using and storing. It gave communities the right to know what dangers they were living next to, and it mandated the creation of local emergency response plans. You can see the shift. The factory fence is no longer a shield of secrecy. The information that Rajkumar Keswani had to fight so hard to uncover in Bhopal, a journalist shouting into the void, is now a matter of public record in many nations. This fundamental change in transparency is a well-known and direct result of the disaster. Beyond just disclosure, the disaster forced a deep, internal reckoning within the chemical industry itself. Companies were forced to reevaluate their entire approach to safety. The old model, which focused on containing accidents after they happened, was proven to be a catastrophic failure. A new philosophy, called inherent safety, began to take hold. The idea was simple but revolutionary. The best way to prevent a disaster is to not have the hazard there in the first place. This meant redesigning chemical processes to use less toxic materials, to store smaller quantities of dangerous substances, or to operate at lower temperatures and pressures. A fascinating and obscure curiosity of this post-Bhopal era is the story of the original Union Carbide plant in West Virginia, the safer twin. In the years following the disaster, that plant, under intense public and regulatory pressure, underwent a massive overhaul. They dramatically reduced their on-site storage of mic, switching to a just-in-time production model where the deadly chemical was produced and immediately consumed in the next stage of the process, never accumulating in large, vulnerable tanks. In a tragic irony, the Bhopal plant's American twin was forced to become the safe facility it should have been all along. Legal historians and policy experts still debate the true global effectiveness of these post-Bhopal reforms. While regulations in Western nations were significantly strengthened, many argue that the fundamental problem, the exporting of hazardous industries to developing countries with weaker regulations and enforcement, has not been solved. It's a phenomenon some call the Bhopal effect in reverse, where instead of safety standards rising globally, hazardous production simply migrates to the path of least resistance. But despite these valid criticisms,